all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We're following developing news out of Baltimore tonight. Crews are right now preparing to conduct a controlled demolition of the remaining span of part of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. The work was delayed over the weekend due to weather. Ahead, we'll have a live report. But first, Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has testified in the former president's criminal trial in New York. He told jurors about the decade he spent working for Trump as his self-described fixer. Cohen paid adult film star Stormy Daniels $130,000 just before the 2016 election in exchange for her silence about an alleged sexual encounter with Trump. Prosecutors say the checks Cohen received to reimburse him were falsely classified as legal payments.
There's no fraud here. There's no crime here. This is 4 weeks of keeping me from not campaigning.
And our Robert Costa and Graham Cates are outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan watching this all for us. Thank you both for being here. Bob, I want to start with you. Can you walk us through what we learned from Cohen on the stand today?
Good to be with you, Caitlin. Michael Cohen walked through his entire life and career with Donald Trump, the former president, going back decades into the early 2000s. He explained how he entered Donald Trump's orbit and ultimately about how he started to facilitate this catch and kill operation with David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, to catch bad stories about Trump and kill them before they were ever published. And he really tightened the circle around Trump and brought Trump into the story as much as possible, including playing audio in the courtroom of a cell phone conversation he recorded about a chat he had with Trump about another hush money payment made to Karen McDougal, allegedly, the former Playboy playmate.
And Graham, I want to pick up on what Bob said there, because these are two men who have had a long history together. And so I'm really curious, we don't have any cameras in the courtroom. So tell us, what was Trump's demeanor like in that courtroom during Cohen's testimony?
There's been a lot of talk throughout this trial about Trump having his eyes shut. And for long stretches throughout this testimony, he rarely seemed to look over to Cohen, but for long stretches, he again had his eyes shut. But, he appeared to be listening. Anytime Melania Trump was mentioned, he would perk up. He would shake his head. He would speak to his lawyers. He was reacting to what was going on, but he was just kind of sitting there, kind of slumped down in this chair. And again, for long stretches, just kind of with his eyes closed as Cohen was testifying. Again, never really looking at Cohen throughout these hours of testimony.
And let's talk about that testimony, Graham. I mean, how important is this testimony to the prosecution's case?
There's no doubt that this is what it's all about. Cohen is the key witness. We've heard throughout this trial people who are designed to bolster Cohen's testimony, introducing documents and kind of prior testimony that he can now mirror, that they can say, even if Trump's team says he has credibility issues, that he's lied under oath before, the prosecutors are going to be able to say, listen to what everyone else said that Cohen also mirrored. And he's the one, as Bob said, who's bringing Trump into the story. He's the only eyewitness, the only person who was in some of the central conversations in which he says Trump okayed him making this payment to Stormy Daniels, and then more crucially, this year's worth of monthly reimbursements to Cohen for that payment that prosecutors say month after month after month involved falsified documents to cover the whole thing up.
And Bob, you've interviewed Cohen before. Can you kind of explain, who he is, or was, I should say, in Trump world?
Well, I used to go visit Trump when he was thinking about running for president back in 2014, 2015. And Michael Cohen was always there. He was a confidant. He was the so-called fixer at Trump's side. And this is someone who had a view into what Trump was doing publicly and privately. And he dealt with issues that were complicated for Trump that didn't necessarily have to do with the Trump organization. So, for example, as Cohen testified today, when a taxi driver hits Trump's limousine, Cohen deals with that sort of issue. He wasn't always just doing development deals. It was a lot of personal family matters that he was getting into for Trump. So when it came to allegations about his conduct, whether it was an alleged encounter or something else, Michael Cohen took care of it. And sometimes, as he testified today, took a lot of steps on his own to try to figure things out for Trump, to impress Trump, to stay in his good graces. Ultimately, they have had a major falling out. He is now an antagonist of Trump publicly, a fierce critic. But for a long time, he was in the inner circle.
Yeah, so, Bob, I mean, we have Michael Cohen on the outs, but you have several people who are trying to get close to Trump now kind of coming into view. It's been interesting to see Republicans join Trump at court. I think J.D. Vance was there today. We are hearing that former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy will be in court with Trump tomorrow. I'm curious, and I think the former president talked a little bit about this. Let's take a listen.
I think this trial is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a sham prosecution. And I think that luckily the president's supporters should know that he's actually in great spirits.
First of all, I'm disappointed in the courtroom. I'm hearing Mr. Trump. He is former President Trump. Give him some respect.
It's truly outrageous that this is how District Attorney Alvin Bragg is choosing to use New Yorkers' tax dollars, wasting precious courtroom time on this sham trial.
All right, so we heard from an array of Republicans who have joined with Trump at the courtroom. Bob, what's the strategy behind this, having, allies at his side at the courthouse?
Well, Trump has a gag order in this case, so he can't necessarily speak out about the jury. He can't speak out about witnesses like Michael Cohen. So if others speak out on his behalf, well, they're not covered under the gag order, so that's to Trump's benefit. But some of these people have their own political ideas and ambitions. Senator Vance of Ohio is someone widely considered to be in the running, possibly, to beat Trump's running mate in the 2024 election. What's notable here is that this is a major, almost seismic event inside the elite ranks of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, but not necessarily in the Republican Party broadly or in American politics across the country. There are no crowds here, no major protests of either Trump critics or Trump supporters, but you do have a couple senators coming here, making sure former President Trump knows they're here. A few members of the House have been here. There was even the Iowa Attorney General, the top law enforcement official in the state of Iowa, was here helping show solidarity with a criminal defendant in New York. It's an odd, surreal American political scene, but it's in step for what we've seen in the 2024 campaign.
Yeah, all seems to go with the former president. Graham, just quickly, what should we look forward to tomorrow in terms of Cohen?
Well, he's still on the stand being questioned by prosecutors. When it's the defense's turn, you can expect that it's going to be a fierce examination. They're going to question his credibility. They're going to attack him for having previously lied under oath. And they're going to hit at his motivations, much as they did for Stormy Daniels, attacking him for essentially profiting off of his antagonism of Trump. They're going to point to his podcasts, his books, his TV appearances, his many, many tweets and other social media about Trump. It's going to be a long, kind of withering attack on who Cohen is now in relation to Trump.
And just one quick point about that. Every time I've spoken with Michael Cohen, I know you've reported on him a lot over the years, he's fully aware of the credibility issues. He's been to jail on federal charges related to this case, lying to Congress. He always says in almost every interview, don't make it about Michael Cohen, make it about the documentation, the checks that were signed by Trump and other papers he has. And we'll see if the jury listens to that point.
All right, Bob and Graham, as I mentioned, no cameras allowed in the courtroom, but I feel like I was there because of your reporting. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. And in Baltimore, crews have just carried out a controlled demolition of the remaining span of the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge. The work was delayed over the weekend due to weather. Ahead, we'll have a live report. Former President Trump takes a break from the courtroom to rally supporters at the New Jersey shore. More on that campaign stop next. You're streaming America Decides.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Former President Donald Trump spent this weekend campaigning in Deep Blue, New Jersey, where he rallied voters in Wildwood.
No, we're going to win New Jersey. If Joe Biden wins this election, the middle class loses, and New Jersey loses.
For more on this, let's bring in our Olivia Rinaldi and Finn Gomez. Thank you so much for being here, guys. So let's talk about, Olivia, this idea. You were at this rally. We have this situation for a couple weeks now where Trump's in the courtroom, then he gets to campaign on the weekends. First, kind of take us in there, and what was it like, and what were voters telling you about the criminal trial? Have they even been watching it?
I mean, it's a typical Trump rally. It's very carnival-like atmosphere, but this time charged up to times 10. You're on a boardwalk in New Jersey, then we're on the beach afterwards. Everyone's in the sand, you know, there's hot dogs, there's planes flying overhead with banners. So just that typical, very energetic Trump rally, tens of thousands of people there. But I did speak with a lot of voters there about the criminal trial going on in New York and if they're paying any attention at all. And a lot of them aren't. They're saying it's a sham trial, repeating some of those company lines that Trump has been saying at his own rallies. But then I spoke with one voter and I asked her, you know, about the Stormy Daniels testimony. She followed it line by line. And take a listen here to what she had to tell me about that.
I don't believe that he did what he did, but I don't want to be naive either. I've been in the business for too long to be naive.
Let's hear it.
So not wanting to be naive, but still following along with the testimony. But even though she said it's possible that an interaction between Trump and Stormy Daniels happened, it's not going to change her vote. So even if it is breaking through to some of these voters, it's not impacting in the way that perhaps we thought it would before the trial.
Already kind of baked in. I mean, Finn, why is he campaigning in New Jersey, of all places? It's not like that is a state threatening to go red, right?
No, it's been very solidly blue, and we know that. I mean, and per like also Olivia's reporting, I think it shows that, you know, Trump is looking to expand. Like they feel that they can be competitive in different areas. The New Jersey does the neighboring. There's a neighboring battleground state next to New Jersey, and that is Pennsylvania,
right?
Of course, and I think
those
that
Philadelphia voters.
And we did see some of the like in southern Pennsylvania, that then key battleground state. We did see some of that going over there to New Jersey, but also it just shows, like in speaking to people close to the Trump campaign, they feel that they can be competitive. They can expand the map, not just their 6 or 7 battleground states, but more. They can be more competitive in other areas, in other states.
I mean, what's so interesting to me this week is that we've seen kind of a parade of Republicans joining Trump by his side at the courtroom. And we always knew kind of the potential vice presidential audition, so to speak, would be a show. But having it at the courtroom is really interesting. I mean, we're going to see Vivek Ramaswamy there tomorrow. Olivia, I know you've been talking to the Trump campaign often about who they're kind of thinking about as VP. Any of these people that we've seen, are they on the list? Could we see potential contenders join him at the courtroom?
For sure, a few folks. I mean, we've been doing some reporting about who of the surrogates are up next. We know a few people will be in New York tomorrow for a fundraiser that Trump is holding in the evening. Vivek Ramaswamy, who maybe isn't at the top of the list, but still someone in consideration, definitely broke through with a lot of younger voters in this GOP primary. They're noticing that, and they know that. And so Ramaswamy, as you mentioned, he's going to be in court tomorrow. I also spoke with some voters at this rally. You know, there's only 63 days until the RNC convention.
Wow.
And we know from Trump campaign officials that have told Finn and I that we're likely to hear who Trump's vice presidential pick will be leading up to that within the couple of weeks. So time is shortening. So we really only have a little bit of time to ask these voters what they're thinking. And I asked a few of them, who would you like to see? I heard Ramaswamy's name a lot. I also heard Kristi Noem's name a lot. I thought that was really interesting after all the controversy we've had about her new book and that story about killing her dog Cricket several years ago. So just really interesting that some of those voters are still open to her, even though Trump campaign officials caution, look, she's a great surrogate for us, but maybe not someone we would ultimately pick for a vice president.
That's fascinating. I mean, Finn, what do you make of that? And also, who else should we be kind of looking at?
No, we're not. If you recall, we're now in a period of time where it's similar. It's going to be essentially The Apprentice on steroids, right? I mean, this is what we're leading into. It's going to be this big unveil, like it's going to winnow down to. But the names that Olivia and I keep hearing are Tim Scott, you know, or Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, J.D. Vance, who was there today. You know, and I think that by showing up there, and showing their support, I think it definitely, that is something politically that looks good for them. And they know that it appeals to Donald Trump as he's in this mode of processing who he's going to pick. Because ultimately, and as we've been told repeatedly, it's going to be up to the former president who he decides his running mate will be. Right?
And the idea of them kind of going to cameras, defending him at his, you know, time of need, I can imagine what we know from reporting in Trump world, that speaks volumes.
Absolutely. And let me just say, like, the sense among top Republican operatives right now, and if you're looking at the New York Times Siena College poll that came out today as well, they feel that Trump has a real shot at the White House. So, as we've seen, this is Washington. We see this in politics all the time. They want to get aligned with someone who potentially could go back into power.
Yeah, I mean, Olivia, those polls that we're talking about are, you know, pretty startling for the Biden team, at least. Are you hearing similar from the Trump folks that they can potentially expand this map? What should we be looking at here?
Oh, absolutely. They are feeling quite confident in these battleground states, so much so that they're looking to expand the map. Part of the reason why he was in New Jersey this weekend. Later this week, he's going to be in Minnesota. It's been decades, I believe since 1972, since a Republican presidential candidate has won Minnesota. Also, Virginia, somewhere where they're looking to expand. There's a few internal polls that they have seen that show Trump very competitive with Biden. That's a state Biden won by 10 points in 2020. So that they're feeling this billowing of support, and that's part of the reason why their attention is turning to those other states.
I mean, especially with such limited time on the campaign trail that it has now and limited resources. That's really interesting to watch.
And a big part of the process of who he will select will be who can help them with that map. Like, can Marco Rubio help them with Nevada and Arizona? We see that the president is underwater in those states, and there's a massive Latino population out. That this, in this New York Times Kind of College poll, we're seeing that they've evened out in their support amongst the Hispanics. Black support for Trump is at 20% at this point, according to this poll across these battleground states. And young people, 18 to 29, it's a dead heat right now for these really crucial parts of the 2020, the Biden 2020 coalition.
Yeah, campaign's all about addition, as we know. So we'll see whether the VP pick can help with that or not. We'll wait to see who it is. Thank you both, Olivia and Finn, for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And gold bars, a new Mercedes, and cold, hard cash. Jury selection is underway in Senator Bob Menendez's federal corruption trial. Our Scott McFarland joins us next to break down the charges. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered. There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Jury selection is underway in the corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. The New Jersey Democrat is accused of taking bribes from 3 businessmen in the form of cash, gold bars, and a Mercedes-Benz in exchange for political favors. Prosecutors also say he secretly helped the governments of both Egypt and Qatar Menendez has pleaded not guilty to all charges. And our Scott McFarland is on Capitol Hill for us tonight. Scott, thanks for being here. So this marks the second time that Senator Menendez's career that he's been heading to trial on corruption charges. How does this case differ from the one that he faced several years ago?
Yeah, 7 years apart, two different bribery cases against the same U.S. senator. There are some symmetries in both cases back in 2017 and now. He's accused of trading official favors and using his office to enrich himself. In 2017, it was allegedly on behalf of a Florida eye doctor. There was a hung jury in that case. It was not charged again. In this case, along with his wife, he's accused of a scheme to engage in bribery and fraud with 3 New Jersey businessmen to help out those businessmen and to help officials tied to Egypt. That's where those gold bars come into play. In this case, he's accused of securing the gold bars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in stacked cash, and a Mercedes convertible. But here's the big difference. He's accused of doing it in concert with his wife, who's a co-defendant. She's not on trial along with Senator Menendez because of a medical issue. Her trial's been separated and delayed. So he's going at this just with the other co-defendants. And early indications from the pretrial court filings, Caitlin, is he may ascribe some of the blame for the alleged misconduct to his wife in the course of his defense.
That's interesting, Scott. So what exactly does she have to do with this case?
According to the allegations from the U.S. Department of Justice, she had this no-show or low-show job for which money was funneling in, part of a scheme to engage in bribery, that she and her husband obviously were living together and working in some ways synchronized with each other in the alleged scheme. There's also the underscored point here is that Senator Menendez has been accused of something similar before, and he's arguing, at least outside of court, that he's being targeted politically for a second time, that this is politically motivated, that he did not engage in misconduct, did not engage in criminal conduct, and will be acquitted. Jury selection was a slow, steady process as this first day of the trial began. If you've ever been through jury duty, you know in the best of circumstances, it can be sluggish. This is a high-profile political corruption case. It was distinctively slow. At one point, Caitlin, the judge and the courtroom staff were asking prospective jurors to raise their hands if they think they can't sit for this jury. Several of them did. Many of them did. Each one got called back for individual questioning by the judge. It's a process that could take days to come.
Yeah, a process that we are now accustomed to, apparently, given what we've been watching in New York. Menendez hasn't ruled out running for re-election this time. He says he would only do it as an independent candidate rather than a Democrat. But I'm wondering if this trial has, pretty much eliminated any chance he may have at maintaining that seat.
It was a real narrow window to begin with, and we learned today this trial is likely to take 6 to 7 weeks. This thing is going to run right into July, narrowing the window further. He's not going to be the Democrats' nominee for his seat. That much the Democratic Party is about to decide. If he runs as an independent, I'm not sure what the trajectory or the political calculus is here, but Senator Menendez would likely argue an acquittal, if he were to secure one, could give him a political shot of nitroglycerin into a race where he's succeeded before.
Yeah, I mean, and just kind of what are the kind of fundamentals of this case? Does he actually have to be in court every day?
A criminal trial puts you in the courtroom an awful lot. I mean, there are certain hearings in the middle of a trial where a defendant may be able to appear virtually or not appear at all, but those are hit and miss. This is going to consume his time for the next month and a half while the Senate does business and while the others running for Senate in New Jersey are full-time on the campaign trail.
And Scott, just quickly, how is his caucus reacting to this?
Oh, there's a variety. There are some senators, including John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who are explicit with their recommendations he step down and step down now. There are other senators who point to the fact he's no longer chairman of that powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee during the process of this trial. We'll see if those calls change or accelerate based on the outcome of this trial.
We will stay tuned. Scott McFarland, thank you very much. And from the campaign trail to the courtroom, former President Trump rallies supporters in New Jersey over the weekend as he goes face-to-face with his former fixer, Michael Cohen, today in Manhattan. Our political panel is standing by to break it all down. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking. Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Former President Trump was back in court today, where his former attorney Michael Cohen took the stand. And despite Trump's protests, the trial is keeping him off the campaign trail. New polling from the New York Times shows it isn't hurting him in key battleground states.
It shows us leading everywhere by a lot. This is the cover story. Nevada, we are leading actually by 12 points, which is generally a Democrat state.
Let's bring in our panel. Sabrina Rodriguez and Braxton Booker join us now. Sabrina is national politics reporter for The Washington Post, and Braxton is a national political correspondent for Politico. Great to see you both. Thanks for being here. So the former president, was just holding up that New York Times poll, and I'm going to do the same. So this is really interesting because it shows that Trump is leading by 12 points in Nevada, having a lead in several swing states, including Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin. Our polling at CBS News shows a dead even race in some of those key battlegrounds as well. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, polls are polls 6 months out from Election Day. But the idea, Braxton, that he is touting these polls, he's in the courtroom, it doesn't seem, at least at this point, that the criminal trial is having an effect on his standing in this race.
Right, and I think that's kind of bad news for Democrats who have really played up the trial as a split screen, saying that, hey, as the president is out doing things to show that he's a steward of the presidency, of the economy, you have someone who is on trial for having secret payments to a porn star. But those things are not really connecting with the American people, and it seems like they are not really paying so much attention to the trial. And that's why we're seeing the president down in some of these key swing states that he needs in order to win re-election.
Yeah, Sabrina, I'm curious. I mean, it's been interesting because the Biden campaign hasn't really touched this trial much. It seems like they're just letting it stand by itself and instead trying to create these split screen moments where they can show they're being presidential while the former president is in court. But I'm curious if you think that's, working, has the potential to work. And also, Donald Trump is still able to campaign on the weekends, at least.
Yeah, I mean, in private, what we've heard for months is, Democrats and Biden campaign folks really talking about, we don't need to put a spotlight on it. The spotlight will already be on it. The news will, the media will already be covering the trials. We don't need to touch it. We'll let it speak for itself. Especially for them, it's a tough thing to navigate because Trump has talked so much about how these trials are politicized, how they're motivated to, undermine him and his candidacy. So for Biden and for the administration, they can't be talking about this on the campaign trail because they'd be feeding into that narrative. But really what we're seeing is a lot of voters, I mean, at this, we're still 6 months out. A lot of people are not paying attention to the day-to-day. They're not paying attention to Biden on the campaign trail, and they're not paying attention to Trump in the courtroom. And I've heard a lot of voters on the campaign trail saying, actually, I'd like to hear less from Trump. So there's actually a part for some people, for more independents and moderate Republicans, it sort of creates that permission structure if they don't have to deal with him saying something very inflammatory on the campaign trail.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've been wondering about that dynamic as well, because it would seem that the more Trump is out there and the reminder of everything related to Stormy Daniels, as much as that's baked in, Brackton, I'm wondering if it does potentially have the possibility to kind of remind voters of Trump.
Certainly. And I think what we really are going to see, now we're in the 5th week of the trial, is whether or not he gets convicted. I think a conviction really changes the dynamic because he's now not just the twice impeached president, he is now the convicted former president seeking a second term. And I think you're going to see Democrats really start to try to paint him in that kind of light. But when you also are talking to Democratic operatives, they will sort of dismiss some of the things that are in the polls, right? Saying, again, like, we got time. But, but when you're looking at how Biden is performing with Black voters, you see that there's softening there among Black support, among Latino support. And when you see Trump getting like something like 20% of Black voters, that represents a tectonic shift here because that really is going to showcase that Biden has some issues that he is not really addressing. And when you talk to Democratic operatives, they sort of dismiss what's been consistent since the later part of last year, where these numbers are pretty high for Trump. And there's nothing that the Biden administration is really doing, or the Biden campaign is really doing to really address this.
Yeah, I mean, that's important to note, too, because it's not like Trump is winning over these groups, but he's doing much better he's gaining support, at least in the polls among these groups. You mentioned Black voters, Latino voters. I mean, we saw in this poll, especially in places like Nevada, almost running even with Trump among Latino voters. I mean, that also has to set off some alarm bells.
Absolutely. And I think it really hits at, for the administration and for the campaign specifically, as they're going on the trail, I mean, it's proof that the economic message isn't necessarily working. In places like Nevada that were so hard hit from the pandemic, the amount of jobs lost, higher interest rates in homes. I mean, I was in Nevada a couple months ago, and you consistently hear about the cost of living, how much it's increased, the high interest rates, how hard it is to get a house. And yes, so the administration can go there, and Biden and Biden allies can go there and talk about how wages have gone up, but people are going to the grocery store. People are trying to buy a house, and they're faced with that reality, and that just hasn't hit. And it's in these battleground states with high percentages of Latino voters.
Yeah, exactly. And Nevada, I mean, the economy there is so based in hospitality, and that was obviously one of the hardest hit industries after the pandemic. Another element that Biden is having to contend with is what we've seen over the last few weeks, which, these protests on college campuses kind of representing this pressure point for the administration, for the reelection campaign, politically speaking, on the issue of Israel and Gaza. And I'm curious if we've seen any kind of examples of that pressure building politically for Biden.
Well, look, I think you continue to see this. Look at Duke University over the weekend when Jerry Seinfeld got up and had his commencement remarks, you see something about 3 dozen students walking out, and there was nothing inherently political about his remarks. So fast forward to what we're going to see this weekend when Biden goes to a swing state in Georgia at a HBCU at Morehouse University. There are concerns that there are going to be kind of, if not widespread protests, there's going to be enough protests that is going to make this a very uncomfortable situation for this president. So I think you're going to continue to see this because this is an inflection and a pressure point that certainly folks on the left see that they can get to this president primarily because he hasn't really addressed it in a meaningful way as far as like why is there unilateral support for Israel, and I don't think he's really answered the question as to why that is for him.
Yeah, and Sabrina, I mean, I was covering Kamala Harris in Florida recently. There were protests outside her event where she was talking about abortion. It seems like, everywhere the administration and the president want to go to talk about their perceived accomplishments, this is following them. And kind of, I guess we'll see how long it persists.
Yes, and it's really posing a challenge for the campaign and for Democrats across the country that are running because, I was also on the campaign trail with them, and the events have to be invite only because there's extra security concerns. So they can't have, very large-scale rallies. It has to be inviting people in certain Democratic circles. And when you're trying to drum up enthusiasm in these battleground states and you're trying to project an image of we're going to win re-election and look at how many people we can bring together, only being able to do invite-only events, that creates an issue. And just in terms of them being able to hold events, for them to be able to go to a commencement, I mean, all these things just don't paint a great picture for the administration.
Yeah, the kind of infrastructure related to setting up these events. Well, as you know, 6 months to go, that's an eternity in politics. So I'm sure we will have many iterations of this, but, remains that this will be a very tight race. So Brackton and Sabrina, thank you so much for your time and reporting. And tensions continue to grow between the White House and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over Rafah. Our Nancy Cordes joins us next from the White House with more.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes.
It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
Israeli forces have pushed across the southern part of Gaza in what the military says are limited and precise attacks targeting Hamas militants. The U.S. says it will not support Israel's operation there without a, quote, credible plan to protect civilians. Israel's military is ordering displaced Gazans to evacuate parts of Rafah. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan called on Israel to do more to protect Palestinians.
Israel has an unusual, even unprecedented burden in fighting this war because Hamas uses hospitals and schools and other civilian facilities for military purposes and has built a vast network of military tunnels under civilian areas. That puts innocent civilians in the crossfire. It does not lessen Israel's responsibility to do all it can to protect innocent civilians. 4, we believe Israel can and must do more to ensure the protection and well-being of innocent civilians. We do not believe what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. We have been firmly on record rejecting that proposition.
And our Nancy Cordes is at the White House with more. Nancy, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So how else is the administration responding to this Israeli operation?
Well, they're warning once again that Israel should not launch any kind of large-scale ground offensive in Rafah, particularly not without providing some kind of plan, which the U.S. insists it still has not seen, to protect civilians there. And over the weekend, the Secretary of State actually went a step further, Caitlin, and in a pair of interviews on the Sunday shows, he basically said that he's seen no credible plan from the Israelis for what comes next after this conflict, how they want to see this power vacuum in Gaza filled if they are successful in getting rid of most of Hamas. If they don't do that, he said they are setting themselves up to inherit an insurgency with many armed Hamas left, or a vacuum filled by chaos, anarchy, and possibly eventually refilled by Hamas. So the administration getting much more outspoken about the fact that U.S. leaders don't believe that Israel has done the hard work of trying to figure out what comes next that looks better than what we had before.
And Nancy, I'm curious what this means for the president's relationship with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in all of this. I know they spoke recently, but what's the latest there?
Well, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, said today that their relationship now is what it has always been, which is direct and straightforward, and they're open with each other about their differences, and nothing that that U.S. officials have been saying over the past couple of days will take Netanyahu by surprise, because these are all the things that they say they've been saying to him privately, and that the president has been saying to him privately for weeks, if not months. It's just that that they're not satisfied with the response that they are getting from Israel, and so now they're trying to up the pressure by saying these things more bluntly and more publicly.
And Nancy, just quickly, did Sullivan identify any areas in which Israel seems to be listening to the U.S. criticism?
Well, you know, there was a lot of talk today over humanitarian aid, and Sullivan said that while they have made a little bit of progress with Israel getting some northern gates open in order to get more U.S. aid in that way, that definitely there is more of a bottleneck now in the south because the Israelis took over the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. So I guess it's, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, according to U.S. officials who were also alarmed, Caitlin, by the fact that a couple of humanitarian aid convoys have now come under attack by Israeli settlers as those convoys were on the way to gates in the north of Gaza. And Sullivan called that today utterly unacceptable. That's something that the U.S. is watching with great concern.
All right, and we will continue to watch as well. Nancy Cordes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And crews in Baltimore demolished a key section of that collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge today. Officials used controlled explosives to break apart a massive chunk of the structure that was sitting on top of that ship that crashed into the bridge late in March. It's estimated to be around 500 feet long and weigh up to 600 tons. The governor of Maryland underscored the importance of the crew's safety earlier today.
Safety in this operation is our top priority. We've gotten to this point without a single injury. We plan on continuing this mission without a single injury. That is the standard that we have going forward.
Our Nicole Skenga is in Maryland near the collapse site. And Nicole, I keep thinking about how you were there those wee hours of the morning as soon as that bridge collapsed. So you have been covering this story since the very beginning. Can you kind of talk to us more about the importance of this controlled demolition that we saw happen today? And what are the next steps here?
Yeah, Caitlin, today marks a real turning point in the effort by so many officials here to clear this channel. You talked about the early hours that Tuesday morning 7 weeks ago when the Key Bridge first collapsed. And at that time, it was about 5,000 feet of that steel bridge that collapsed into the Patapsco River. But just to put it in perspective, about 10% of that steel truss was sitting atop and is still sitting atop the container ship Dolly. That is the structure that officials were hoping to break apart today as part of this really complicated operation, this controlled demolition, what officials have called using precision pressure charges in order to really break apart 400 to 600 tons of steel, 8 to 12 million pounds. Now, in terms of what we can look ahead to in the coming days, in high tide, in just 2 days, officials are hoping that they can refloat the container ship Dolly once they confirm that the area surrounding that massive 890 feet container ship is clear. At that point, 4 tugboats will come in. It'll tow the container ship about 2.5 miles away to the Seagirt Marine Terminals. At that point, more containers will be loaded off the ship. And we should mention, Caitlin, that throughout all of this, over the past 7 weeks, that 21-member crew has remained on the ship of the Dolly. In fact, they were below deck when today's operation took place. They will have an opportunity to offload there as well.
Wow, Nicole, I did not realize that. And thinking about 7 weeks, I can't believe that amount of time has passed. At the time, there were all sorts of questions about what kind of impact this collapse could have on the economy. Have we seen the consequences of that?
Absolutely. I want to run some numbers by you. 15,000 direct jobs tied to the port of Baltimore, $70 billion in revenue running through the port of Baltimore every year. For those trying to do the math, the governor pointed out that's $191 million per day. We have seen some aid to the tune of $22 million go to small businesses impacted, $2.5 million to port workers. One last number, it's going to cost an estimated $1.7 to $1.9 billion to rebuild the bridge, according to the Maryland Department of Transportation. Caitlin?
And a long process indeed. Nicole Skenga, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Capitol Hill turns to the dogs as lawmakers get some stress relief, all thanks to these four-legged friends. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We'll take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Amid the chaos on Capitol Hill, this Democratic leader has been able to reach across the aisle to avert crisis and get some things done.
We were sent by the American people to solve problems.
Hakeem Jeffries explains how.
Voters in Maryland, West Virginia, and Nebraska are heading to the polls tomorrow for their state's primary contests. In Maryland, Senate candidates are vying to replace Ben Cardin. The Democratic primary is a tight race between Congressman David Trone and Prince George's executive Angela Alsobrooks. Trone has spent more than $61 million of his own money on the campaign. Alsobrooks is trying to make history as the state's first black senator. The winner could face the state's former Republican governor, Larry Hogan. Meanwhile, Republicans in West Virginia are aiming to flip Joe Manchin's seat from blue to red. Manchin is not running for re-election. The state's governor, Jim Justice, is the frontrunner in the packed GOP field. Four-legged friends are doing their part to bring smiles to government workers in Washington. The therapy dogs visited Capitol Hill, the State Department, and USAID. Natalie Brand tagged along for one of the canines' visits.
They travel to some of the most powerful, high-stress jobs in the nation's capital to deliver a needed pause.
It's a super popular day whenever we get the notices.
Therapy dogs from the nonprofit organization PAL provide cuddles, comfort, but most importantly, a bit of self-care.
By taking care of themselves, I think they may be in a better place to do the work that they're doing.
Sharon Forrence works at the Staff Care Service Center for the U.S. Agency for International Development. She says the dog's twice-a-month visits have the added bonus of drawing people to her department.
But it also allows us to talk about the programs that we have for all of the staff members here and their family members.
There's such a need. There's a big demand.
Heather Gomes, executive director of PAL, says the pups and their volunteer handlers also visit the State Department weekly. as well as the U.S. Senate and Capitol Hill police officers on holidays.
I think it helps alleviate burnout, for sure. We need to take a break. We can't be running on adrenaline all the time.
Research has shown animal-assisted therapy can reduce anxiety, stress, and fatigue. Gretchen Burkle, who works in USAID's Bureau for the Middle East, brought her colleagues for a moment of calm.
It's important to be able to step away just for a few minutes, kind of catch your breath, refocus a bit.
She says they leave revived, renourished, and ready to get back to work. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
That does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for May 13th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Michael Cohen's testimony in the Trump trial cannot be the most important story in the world today, and it isn't. In Gaza, the displaced are having to displace themselves again. 360,000 Palestinians have fled Rafah, trying to outrun rolling tanks and